I think the Himalaya is the sexiest mountain range. The ultimate boy's own adventure. When I was 10 years old, Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay made the first ascent of Everest. I never imagined that one day I'd follow them into the Himalaya. But 5 decades later, I did.
Look at that. Wow.
It's the Himalayas. Yeah, the Himalayas.
He's going for one of the most extraordinary places on the planet.
He has huge warmth, and it's a warmth that spreads across all kinds of people.
Bottoms up, down the house.
Now I'm looking back on that epic journey and opening up my diaries to revisit my trip to the roof of the world.
Your face very familiar to me because of BBC.
Oh, wonderful.
I had that boyhood feeling of adventure.
This is the summit of Annapurna, and really, I mean, it's just breathtaking.
I wasn't a boy anymore. I'm 60 years old and more when we set off for the Himalaya. It was like fulfillment of a dream that I thought would never ever come true. I've spent decades traveling the world, and if I'm ever tempted to think I've seen it all, this amazing planet has always proved me wrong. But nothing on my journeys really prepared me for the Himalaya. What mattered really was somewhere striking, somewhere that had a sort of an identity, a feeling, a sort of impact. I just saw and heard the word Himalaya. It was an epic word. The Himalayan range contains many of the highest mountains on Earth, and it's home to over 50 million people. Quite a new mountain range, and they're actually apparently going higher by about an inch a year or something like that, because of the tectonic plates pushing from the south. The top of Everest is actually a little segment of limestone, which means it was once on the seabed, which is a great thought. Our route would take us 3,000 miles across the Himalaya, up into the high mountains, then down again to the sea. From Pakistan, we would travel through northern India towards Nepal, Tibet, and Mount Everest itself. From there, we'd explore the Great Tibetan Plain and the Buddhist kingdom of Bhutan, before descending to Bangladesh and the Bay of Bengal. Descending and turning east once again, we made for Nepal's evocative capital city, Kathmandu. After the emptiness of the mountains, Kathmandu comes as quite a shock. Almost 1 million are squeezed into Nepal's capital, built on the widest valley in the Himalaya. Kathmandu is full of wonders, and the buildings and the architecture there is unlike anything I'd seen on the whole journey. 200, 300-year-old temples and shrines. Like Dharamsala and Amritsar, this is a place of deep religious significance, where Nepali Hindus say farewell to their loved ones. Down at the Ghats, business is brisk as funeral pyres and their attendants are worked flat out to cope with demand.
I think every Hindu or every religious person needs to come to Pashupatinath, and where it is the place to be cremated. Sons carry the body and walk bare feet, and they bring the body to Pashupatinath and lay them on the
They actually walk through the town.
Walk through the town,
barefoot,
yes.
And bring the body here.
Yep.
And there's no burial in the Hindu religion.
No burial.
It's always cremation. Yeah.
Among the other remarkable things in Kathmandu was seeing the burning Ghats, where bodies were disposed of by the side of the river. A pyre had been erected, a wooden pyre, and then a body is brought out. And it was the body of a woman, and was laying on the top of the pyre. And a fire was lit by members of the family. The priest talks to the family, and they then lift the body onto the pyre. It's the body of a woman, younger than I expected. Basil leaves and water are placed in the dead woman's mouth as prasad, food consecrated and blessed by the gods. The oldest male heir applies a lighted taper to the body. Shaking with emotion, he then walks to the end of the pyre and buries his head on her feet. I feel I should look away, but I can't. I know nothing about these people yet. In this brief ceremony, I feel a wave of empathy, not just for them, but for loss, for the end of a life. I come from somewhere where death is kept private, almost as if it's an embarrassment. Here in Pashupatina, it's very much hands-on. The reality of death, the fact of death, is confronted, not avoided. And it really changed my thoughts about how we dispose of bodies. Most people in this country now tend to be cremated, but we leave that destruction of the body, if you like, to somebody else. Whereas the essence of what was happening in Kathmandu that day was that the family, although men only, but the family were dealing with it themselves. There was emotion there, but it was something which they went through. It wasn't something that horrified or shocked them. It seemed the most honest way of disposing of a body of one of your loved ones. And when the fire's burnt down, the ashes are dropped into the river, and they go down into the Ganges and the sacred river and out to the Bay of Bengal in the end. Kathmandu was the last city we would see for a while. We were heading into one of the most barren and inhospitable places on Earth, the Great Tibetan Plateau. They call this the roof of the world, and for the next few weeks I won't drop below 13,000 feet. The prayer flags that mark the high passes show that despite strenuous efforts by the Chinese in the 1960s and 70s, religion still exists here. What no longer exists is a country called Tibet. We are now in what is officially known as the Tibet Autonomous Region, a part of the People's Republic of China. At one point, there were two very high passes, and I think it was at the second one, the cars just drew to a halt, and the director said, "Michael, stay, can you stay in the car? And we're just going to set up the camera because we want to see your reaction to what you're going to see over the other side of this pass." And so they do that, and I walked up.
Look at that. Wow. Well, great moment. My first view of Everest. I mean, not apart from photos in restaurants and things like that. And just a most glorious, mighty view. And it's the very, very heart of the Himalayas out there. Giant mountains, of 4 or 5 of them, all over 8,000 meters. And Everest there, just slightly touched by the cloud. Absolutely epic. It really does make it all worthwhile.
It was truly astonishing and unbelievable. The great panorama of the Himalayas were down there. And I don't know, it was just some trick of where you were. You almost felt you were above all the other mountains. There was Everest in the middle of them all. But it was like looking at a model of the Himalayas
laid out in front of you. And Everest there, sort of bit like, you know, the statues of Queen Victoria you see in various Indian parks. The Queen there in the middle of it all, just slightly higher than everything else around.
Drawing closer to the foot of Everest itself, we relied more than ever on the hospitality of the few hardy souls who lived their lives up here at the top of the world. A community that, like so many in the Himalaya, was founded on faith. Rongbuk consists of a monastery, half a street, a guest house, and an almost unbelievable view of the highest point on the planet. It's hard to imagine what degree of devotion enables them to survive the bitter cold and isolation up here in Rongbuk.
It's a cold, cold place they have to be.
The amount of different religions that he comes across there, from Islam in Pakistan, you know, to Sikhism in India, and then to Buddhism in Tibet, it's all happening within this mountainscape of the Himalayas. And part of me kind of made me think, well, maybe it's because they live in such harsh and difficult conditions. You need some sort of faith to keep you going.
The only problem with being so close to Everest is that you're very high up, there's very little oxygen, and you have to keep breathing very hard. When you're just slightly dozing off, suddenly you wake up gasping for breath, trying to just get that oxygen in. So it's actually bloody uncomfortable at night.
Sleep, when it comes, doesn't stay long. Somewhere in the middle of the night, with Everest seen through my cracked window, bathed in near full moonlight, you think, oh, wow, I paid for this. Anyway, I suffer a couple of hours of shortage of breath. The wind howls, making the prospect of the toilet block even more miserable.
I know Everest is out the window. I know it looks lovely, but I'd exchange it, you know, for something 2 foot off the ground if it had showers and a flushing toilet.
The toilet block was, for all the people there was just 2 holes in the ground, basically. Very little cover. And I can deal with most things, but I couldn't deal with that particular toilet block. I went out into the fields with my little roll of toilet paper, which blew away across the Tibetan Plateau. I thought, oh, God, you know, I've got toilet paper around Everest. I shouldn't be doing that. This is entirely wrong. Just one of those things. And yet, the view from that room through, I say, a cracked window with yellowing sellotape sort of trying to seal the gap was of the north face of Everest, and it was stunningly beautiful. I wasn't actually planning an assault on the north face, but we were heading for a spot that, for me, felt just as exciting. As so often on this journey, progress was at the pace of a yak.
The wonderful thing is you're with the yaks and you're on foot. You slowly get to know a place. You're not just getting out of a vehicle and meeting someone, shaking hands. You are walking into a landscape whereby you slowly become immersed in it. And that, of course, that's what Michael had to do.
I think there are 2 approaches for going to the Himalayas. Maybe you want to go there to challenge yourself as a mountaineer or a climber and just to really set yourself a physical challenge of going to this extraordinary place. But there's also a very different way of going to the Himalaya, and that's the way that Michael went, which is very much about immersing yourself in the extraordinarily different cultures and communities that you find right the way across the Himalaya. There's a slowness to it, but it's a sort of deeper connection, I think, to the place and its people. And I think that's really lovely, is that we really feel like we are literally walking the paths with him.
We are living in an age where things need to be faster. To watch Michael here where he's having to walk, things are slower, but also the pace of the show is gentle and slow. It's really beautiful, actually, and it's like a reminder. You're almost like forced to engage with it at a different level. And it's slightly uncomfortable for us because we're so used to things like, where's the cut, where's the move, where's the next thing? And it's like, no, maybe we can slow down a bit and feel.
And in the mountains, meal times weren't to be rushed either. Sunday lunch is taken at a little over 17,000 feet.
Yes, nice. Very nice. Yeah, it's kind of, yeah, it's good actually. It's salty tea, favourite tea. Yeah.
I believe very, very strongly that sharing food is one of the most important elements in making contact with people. It's the way of sharing. Once you sit down to eat together, you, in every culture and every civilization, that's really where you share your thoughts and your moments, because everybody's sharing in the good that the food and the drink are doing to them. Just celebrating the joy of just being alive and not having to rush off anywhere. Not that there were some places to rush off to.
Okay, cheers. Down the house. Bottoms up, as they say in the Sahara.
Living in really difficult, harsh environments, you're constantly sort of up against it, up against these challenges. You know that everybody else is too, and so there's much more. The hand of friendship is always extended. Watching Michael's shows, he has formed these bridges between different cultures, but he does it with such a remarkable style.
You know, there are always things in your childhood that you remember as being something extraordinary and the world changing as a result of what had happened. And one of the great things I remember was the ascent of Everest, and the fact it was announced brilliantly on the day of the Queen's coronation made it even more sort of epic. I had this book and treasured it for a long time, and I went to New Zealand in 1998 and actually met Edmund Hillary, and I'd taken the book with me hoping I might meet the great man. And I not only met him, but he actually introduced me in some talk. And Edmund Hillary had been the man who got up Everest, saying, well, you know, I'm really pleased tonight I have Michael Palin, one of the great intrepid adventurers. And I thought, come on. But anyway, there it is, signed by Edmund Hillary.
But there's another Everest story with an even greater hold on my imagination.
I suppose one of the great events of my childhood was the conquest of Everest in 1953. But as a boy, I can remember being even more fascinated by the idea that Everest might have been climbed 30 years before. In 1924, a guy called George Mallory made base camp here for an attempt on the north face of Everest. A few weeks later, he and his climbing partner Andrew Irvine were observed disappearing into a cloud only a few hundred yards from the summit of Everest. Neither of them were ever seen again. It's one of the great mysteries. Did they or did they not climb Everest in 1924?
That seems kind of right somehow, so that no one person would say, we've conquered this. Just looking at the drama that must have gone on and the intensity of emotion that must have been connected with the last few thousand feet of that rock, because there were people waiting, especially with Mallory and Irvine, watching the little specks in the snow get smaller and smaller but get closer and closer to the top. And they must have been willing them on. There must have been such a kind of, such an intensity of expectation at that time. There I was looking at the line, the ridge that these men would have travelled up to the summit before they disappeared into a cloud and then were never seen again. Mallory and Irvine had disappeared up that slope. And I looked up and it all seemed you know, so simple. It just seemed you would just keep on climbing. It kind of brought me very close to what had been a story and a kind of adventure. It made me very aware that I didn't really want to climb to the top of mountains. I really wasn't interested in getting to the top of Everest or any of the other mountains. I was interested in being in the mountains. I could see the beauty and the power and the magnificence of the mountains. I was rather of the same mind as those who live around there who say, you want to climb up there? You're crazy, you know. It's bad enough living down the bottom. You want to go up to the top? It's cold and miserable. So I got a little bit of that. And I wasn't sure if this would happen. I thought I might get, the closer we got to, you know, the high slopes of Everest, that I might suddenly feel, right, let's keep going, and feel very disappointed that I was torn away and then have to carry on with the journey. But it didn't happen like that. I was just really happy to be that close to Everest and be able to just contemplate that slope going up to the summit. I was nearly 60 when I walked up a bit of Everest, but I did it, you know, and it seemed like it sort of completed something. I think if you read a lot when you're young, as I did, of these adventure stories, you have an image in your mind of what it must have been like, and also not just physically what the mountains looked like, but also the arduousness of actually moving through difficult terrain like that, what they wore, what they drank, what they ate, how they became ill, how they dealt with it when someone became ill, all that sort of stuff. You feel for, I felt for, you know, for those people. Our routes now took us across the Tibetan plain towards Lhasa, the world's highest capital city, where another boyhood dream was about to come true. If a nation could be symbolized by a single structure, Tibet was the Potala Palace.
I remember seeing this extraordinary building in photos in my encyclopedia when I was young, quite unlike anything else I'd seen, the essence of foreignness and strangeness. And of course I'd never expected to see it, because at that time Tibet was closed. There was no chance of seeing it. Now, of course, I can come here. Tibet's open again, but sadly the Dalai Lama, whose palace it was, has gone, and it's now just a museum.
If you make it to the roof, you'll find the most enchanting of all the palace's 1,000 rooms, the Eastern Sunshine Apartment. This was the Dalai Lama's bedroom.
At the top, from the roof, your relationship to the city below is that of an eagle to the ground. If ever there was a physical feeling of being on top, of looking out over your subjects, of being lord of all you survey, it's embodied here in the Potala. Figures like ants down in the streets below makes Buckingham Palace look like a bungalow. Yeah. It's rather one of these things of cocktail party chat. And I was talking to the Dalai Lama, and I was talking to the Dalai Lama, and he said that when he was young, he loved looking at atlases and maps, and he would look out of the windows of the Potala Palace across the plain. Then he said, one day I'll go out and I'll see all these places. And I said, oh, that's just the same as me in Sheffield. You know, I thought, will I ever leave Sheffield? There be you in the Potala Palace and be at Whitworth Road, thinking very much the same sort of things.
Pictures of Tibet and the Potala Palace had seized my young imagination. What I didn't imagine was just how cold it would be.
Tibet is the coldest country I've ever been. I was cold all the time I was there. I don't think there was a heater in the whole of Tibet. The irony is, the warmest I ever got in Tibet was when I took my clothes off.
Oh, wonderful. Problem with Tibet is it's a very big place and very difficult to heat. And this is the first time I've been really warm in 2 weeks in Tibet. And I've had to come to this Olympic-sized swimming pool north of Lhasa, at about 14,000 feet to really be warm. And it's lovely. Who needs clothes when you've got the hot springs?
I got to this place, the roof of the world, really. Bitterly cold outside, but a hot spring. And take my clothes off and get warm, yes. Whereas all the rest of the time we'd just been putting on more and more clothes. Everything you'd ever bought in the world you were wearing, and that's only at night. Lightly defrosted, I pressed on, across the enormous emptiness of Tibet. I wanted to find out what was life like up here for the few people who called it home. 400 miles northeast of Lhasa, summer has arrived on the plateau, and the yak are fattening themselves up. Sonam and his brother are moving their herd to make the best of the fresh pasture. The tent that is their summer home is predictably yak dependent. It's made from their hair and heated by their droppings.
Ah, thank you. It's a bit warmer in here than out there on the high plateau. Hello. Hello, little ones.
The children were behaving very much the way children would behave at home, if I'd my own grandchildren or something like that.
I'm Michael. Not that you're interested. We've not known each other for long, have we, Sonam? Somehow, although you can't speak my language and I can't speak your language, we somehow know what we're on about. Eating, sharing food together, children. It's a very similar thing. Children are always the same, you know, aren't they? They're always, one of them's going like that and they're very happy and they're always going, "Wah!" It's the same in England, it's the same in Tibet, wherever you are.
And we ended up just talking, rather like I'm telling you the story now, myself and Sonam, about how children are.
Funny thing that, isn't it? Who needs phrase books? Hello. Hello.
I've rarely been as comfortable and as exhilarated by the connection between two different sets of people, kind of different languages and different backgrounds, as I was in that tent with Sonam and Mrs. Sonam and the two little children. It was so like home.
Hey! I saw that.
I think people can get quite nervous when confronted with other people from other unfamiliar areas, but if there can be a shred of humour there somewhere, a connection, something that makes you both laugh, whatever it might be, I don't know, it might be tripping over as you go into their house or something like that, and then you laugh at that. People love it, because you find that, well, slapstick is universal. And that's been very useful on my journeys.
I think that we, as humankind, have so much more in common than that which divides us. And travel can do that. It can show you just how amazing other people are from other cultures, even though you might think there's so many things that are different, actually, in reality. It's just the little things. It's sharing a cup of tea and cracking a few jokes can suddenly mean that you're invited into someone's home and you become lifelong friends.
Not everyone gets the privilege of going to these places and meeting these people. And then suddenly, through Michael, you're meeting them and you're engaging with them. And especially with Michael, who's just such an amazing companion to watch, you know, and his ability to make it light and to bring people alive was something that we were all the grateful recipients of watching.
But we still had some hard travelling ahead. All too soon, it was time to leave this friendly family and Tibet itself and continue my journey. I headed east and then south into yet another spectacular landscape. Tiger Leaping Gorge. I was on my way to Nagaland.
In Nagaland, which is of extreme sort of northeast on the borders of India and Burma, and a tribal group called the Konyak Nagas, who have lived in that area for, thousands of years, and are now being slightly pushed back and marginalised. But traditionally, the males were headhunters.
The Naga comprise a dozen different tribes, of which these, the Konyak Nagas, were the last to give up the proud tradition of headhunting. On these necklaces, each brass face means a head taken.
I met this man who had 5 of them, so I was talking to, a reasonably successful headhunter, and it was difficult to know what to talk about.
What's that? Tattoo, yes. Yeah.
Tattoo of the chest.
Yes. What does that mean? Does that it goes all the way down?
Yeah.
Lifted his sort of shirt and showed me an incredibly complex tattoo.
There's a lot of history in there. My stomach's very boring, look at that. Very boring.
So I pulled up my shirt and showed him my sort of pink, unillustrated Western chest.
Oh, yes, there we are. Oh, I think you win. You win on the decorative stakes.
I mean, it could have gone completely the wrong way, I suppose. And I could have been seized by several men and taken off. I think I got the right moment and the right man to have that moment with. So suddenly, from being a fierce headhunter, he was also a man who liked a bit of fun. I would like to have found more out about the headhunting when he'd hunted his last head, and whether these were perhaps his father's or his grandfather's. Quite often I found myself in situations where I learnt a certain amount and broke down a barrier between myself and someone from somewhere very different. And yet that suddenly opened up all sorts of questions I wanted to ask. And you never really had time. They're still part of India. Some of them are just across the border, Burmese. But one wonders really how long their identity is going to really last, how many more generations as the modern world extends.
From Pakistan to Tibet and Nagaland, many of the Himalayan societies I'd visited were in some kind of turmoil, their cultures clashing with each other or with the wider world. But close by Nagaland is a country that has largely resisted the march of modernity. A kingdom of mountains and forests, where tradition is respected and protected. Bhutan. There's room to move here. Bhutan is the size of Switzerland, with a population of little more than 1 million. It has one of the strictest environmental policies in the world. More than a quarter of the country is national park, where not even fallen wood can be gathered without permission.
Bhutan is as spectacular as a lot of the other Himalayan countries. Because it had resisted foreign invasions, because it had resisted absorbing foreign workers and foreign workforces largely, it had preserved a way of life which wasn't just a sort of for show and wasn't just for festivals, it was the way they lived. And it seemed to be sort of working. It gave Bhutan a particular identity.
The influence of Buddhism is everywhere, like this dramatic cliff-top hermitage.
A lot of holy spots seem to crop up all over Bhutan. What was special about here?
Legend claims it was founded by a saint, Guru Rinpoche, who rode here on a tigress 1,200 years ago and turned himself into something so nasty that the evil spirits fled and left the valley to Buddhism.
Another view. Wow, fantastic. That's all.
I really, really loved my time in Bhutan. You really feel like you're stepping back in time, and you feel like not that many people have got to see some of these vistas. There's something about the sort of the majesty and the magnitude and the sort of impressiveness of the mountains that sort of lends itself to magical thinking. There's no surprise that the people and the beliefs there have nature and the landscape very much at the heart of it.
Religious symbolism is at the heart of Bhutanese life. If you want a safe journey, you don't pass a prayer wheel without spinning it.
Leave one for you. Round, round.
I find it fascinating that it's not about economy, it's not about resources, it's not about making loads of money. It's about happiness. It's about being eco-friendly. It's about living at one with their environment.
You will come across a valley, you will come across an environment which you think, this is heaven, this is paradise. There's something about it. There's the grandeur, but also the fruitfulness of some of the fields. This is where man was meant to live.
How many days before we start to go down now, really, and how many days before we get to Paro?
About 2 days from now, we'll be in Paro.
3 days?
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And for the festival, we'll be there for the festival.
Yeah, so it's kind of pretty much downhill from here? Or?
Yeah, downhill all the way.
By tonight, the majestic peaks of the Himalaya will be behind us for the last time. So while the tents are being struck, I pick my way up the hill for a last look. I feel my own personal pangs of regret at leaving all this behind. There are few places outside the Himalaya where the relation of man to nature can be experienced on such a gigantic scale. And something like that may not change your life, but it does stretch it a bit.
It's a bit of a sad moment, really, because up there behind the clouds is probably the last of the great Himalayan peaks that I shall see on this journey, Jomolhari, about 24,000 feet, just over 7,000 metres. I'll miss the big mountains, and, I mean, nowadays I think those are the only mountains in the world. Anything less than 20,000 feet is just tiny. So, farewell, the big monumental Himalayan peaks. Farewell, Jomolhari.
A lot of that trek I'd done as well. And you got to give Michael full respect. He treks it. I did some of it on horseback, some of it on crutches, and some of it on car. It's hardcore.
And so at last, we descended from the roof of the world to a place that couldn't be more of a contrast. Bangladesh has had a hard life. It won independence from Pakistan in 1971 amidst war, massacre and famine, which few in the West even noticed. George Harrison was an exception.
I thought it was very important that the Himalaya should not end where the mountains ended, but where the unique environment, which is entirely created by the mountains and by the physical geography of the Himalaya, ends. And that is really where the rivers meet the sea. There's the Irrawaddy, the Mekong, the Salween, the Brahmaputra, Ganges, they all flow from the Himalaya. So here you had the complete antithesis of the Himalayan ranges, flat, green fields. Millions of people living in dense cities. I felt this was where the journey ought to end, because this is really what living under the influence of the Himalaya gets you.
It's 90 miles from Mongla to the Bay of Bengal. The only boat that'll take me down there is an ex-lifeboat with a viewing platform grafted on top of it. On either side are the sinister, uninhabited banks of the largest coastal mangrove forest in the world. These are the Sundarbans, habitat of the Royal Bengal tiger, which, despite frequent appearances on the travel posters, runs the Yeti a close second for elusiveness. In a tiny space next to the lavatory, our cooks prepare the last meal of the journey. Locally caught crab, lobster, and the best prawns in the world.
They made us one of the best meals I had on all my journeys. As they were going down this huge wide delta, there were various single fishing boats. And they kept stopping there and asking what fish he had, and then they stopped at another one. And I remember thinking at the time, come on, we should be getting there. And then you realise this was all part of getting the best fish soup ever together. And we were just going, oh, this is just sensational.
At last, the moment has come. After 6 months in the mountains, I can sniff the unfamiliar smell of the open sea. As I head off onto the Bay of Bengal on millions of tons of mud that was once Himalaya, I feel I've made the last in a chain of connections between the sea and the mountains we've climbed, and the gorges we've walked, and the rivers we've sailed. And all the people we've met along the way suddenly seem very close. With that, my epic Himalayan journey was at an end. It had been an adventure that surpassed even my boyhood dreams.
You've got absolutely everything. You've got extraordinary landscapes, physical power and strength of nature.
You're also looking at the sort of human element who lives in the Himalaya.
Bottoms up, down the house.
Hello. Hello.
That's what's so lovely about this programme. It's about going for these extraordinary places and really appreciating the experience of it all.
This definitely physically was the most difficult and the most potentially arduous.
I just have a feeling I'm going to make it.
My crew, of course, did all these things with me.
It wasn't just me against the mountains, it was a team of us.
I feel like Michael was at his best here. It felt like a labour of love, and it felt like one of those childhood dreams.
I just kept that sense of wonder. I still saw it with a child's eye, in a way. Himalaya was a very powerful force in my imagination. Never, ever, ever, ever expected that I would actually end up climbing halfway up Everest.